She showed up on a Tuesday. No welcome, no fanfare. Just stepped off the supply truck with a clipboard in one hand and a worn canvas duffel slung over her shoulder. The tag on her coveralls read HOLLIS. No rank, no unit. Refueling rotation, someone said. Civilian contractor. Backfill for a short-staffed ground crew. She was assigned to base 17's rotary wing pad, a row of UH-1YS, 2 newer TH-73s, and one aging HH-60W. The crew's just called the Mule, because it limped on startup but never quit. Morales didn't think much of her at first. She didn't talk during morning brief, didn't ask questions, didn't fumble with the equipment like new hires sometimes did. She just nodded once, pulled on gloves, and started walking the line. That's what caught his eye. The walk. Not rushed, not distracted. She moved like the flight line had weight, like every step mattered. Her eyes scanned the skids and rotors as if they were speaking. Not curiosity. Recognition. She didn't look at people. She looked at the aircraft, one by one. She paused longer at bird 3. Tapped the belly once with the back of her knuckle. Soft. Didn't explain it. Just logged something on her clipboard and moved on. Morales watched from behind the fuel truck, half curious. When he approached later, she was tightening a cap fitting without tools, bare hands on the seal like she knew the resistance by feel. "You been on this line before?" he asked. "No," she said, eyes still on the valve. "Then how'd you know that one leaks pressure?" She stood slowly, wiped her hands. "I didn't," she said. "But the deck told me." He almost laughed, but didn't, because she wasn't joking. That night, Morales checked the maintenance log. Bird 3 had a pressure issue. Undetected. Until now. By the end of her second day, the nicknames started floating around. "Jet Juice Jill." Someone from the avionics shed said it first. Morales didn't know who. But once it landed, it spread fast, not cruel, just careless. The kind of joke people make when they don't understand what they're looking at. She didn't react. Just kept walking the pad, same pace, same posture. Her steps followed the rotor arcs like they were lines drawn into the concrete. She checked panels before they were marked, adjusted cables without being asked. She never interrupted briefings. But once, when the crew lead called for a cold start on the TH-73, she coughed lightly and said, "No go on bird 2. The lead frowned. "What's the issue?" She tapped the intake cap with her knuckle, once flat. "Still warm. 5 degrees too early. You'll stall it on ignition." The crew checked. She was right. Nobody said thanks. No one asked how she knew. She just moved on. Morales started noticing small things. The way she leaned into the wind before opening a panel, not to steady herself, but to listen. The way her eyes tracked the tail rotor on the HH-60W like it was a metronome, not machinery. Once she stayed late while others cleared out. Just her and the Mule under halogen floodlight. Morales watched from the tarmac shadows as she stood next to the aircraft with one hand on the intake housing, eyes closed. Not checking. Remembering. He asked her the next day where she'd learned to feel birds like that. She shrugged. "Not all lessons come with manuals." He waited for more. She gave none. Later that week, someone in the hangar tried to hand her a basic tech sheet, suggested she brush up on hydraulic tags. She read it once, then rewrote it. Not corrected, refined. Faster callouts, streamlined order, matched pressure curves by hand. The mechanic laughed. "You act like you flew one." She didn't answer, but her hands tightened slightly, and she walked away without a word. It happened on a Thursday. Flight ops were staggered. The wind had shifted hard across the ridgeline, kicking dust onto the pad in swirling bursts. Not dangerous, but close enough that crews were on edge. Systems needed recalibration. Everyone was tired, short-tempered. She was crouched by the HH-60W, logging readings from a pressure valve. Nothing unusual, until Sergeant Triggs saw her from across the lot. Triggs was loud, led tech on shift that week. Used to barking orders, especially when people didn't wear rank. He walked up behind her, boots crunching over gravel. "Contractor," he called sharp. She stood slowly, looked over her shoulder. "You sign off on this Mule startup?" She didn't answer right away. Triggs jabbed his thumb at the bird. "Because if this thing spins hot again and cooks a line, it's your name in the report." She wiped her gloves on her coveralls and looked at him calmly. "I logged a hold." "Yeah? With who?" She lifted her clipboard. "Maintenance office. Secondary coolant bypasses reading unstable." He snorted. "You think you can eyeball that just from walking by?" She didn't reply. He stepped closer, voice rising just enough for others to turn. Listen, Jet Juice. You're here to carry hoses, not play crew chief. Let the real techs do the real checks. That's when Morales stood. He'd been sorting tie-down straps behind the TH-73. Walked forward without speaking at first. Triggs raised an eyebrow. Something to say, Morales? Morales looked at Hollis, then back at Triggs. She's the reason Bird 3 didn't lock up last week. Triggs crossed his arms. Bird 3 had a faulty cap. She caught it before we did. Without the log. Triggs glanced at her again. What, you a flight whisperer now? For the first time, her voice cut slightly through the air. No, she said. But I remember what a wounded rotor sounds like. The lot fell quiet. Triggs muttered something and walked off, shaking his head. She turned back to the bird. Didn't flinch. Didn't explain. Just touched the skin near the intake, like she was listening again. And Morales, he watched her more closely after that. Not because of what she'd said, but because of what she didn't. Morales couldn't shake the way she'd said it. I remember what a wounded rotor sounds like. Not guessed, not observed, remembered. There was something behind it. Not pride, not arrogance. Something deeper, quieter, worn in. He started asking around. No one knew where she came from. Her file was thin. Civilian logistics contract, filled by rotation. Background clearance verified, nothing flagged. One supervisor said she'd been stationed at another site down south. Didn't remember which one. No complaints. No requests. Just showed up, worked clean, moved on. That night, Morales stayed late. He walked the mule's tail arc, retraced her steps. He found nothing unusual, until he ducked into the back end of the old flight locker. It hadn't been used in months. Dust hung thick in the corners, spare cables, a few faded maintenance tags, and tucked inside a bent ammo crate, a pilot's kneeboard. Old, leather-strapped, worn soft at the corners, folded beneath the edge, a single laminated card, standard flight ops sheet. Except at the top corner, instead of a name or call sign, there were two stenciled letters in red ink. W.H. He stared at it for a long time. Those initials, HOLLIS. He opened the sheet fully. The rest was faded, but one section still held. Night Air Rescue / No Comms / Blackout Routing, Gulf Sector. Bird ID, Echo 9. Pilot, W. HOLLIS. Classified timestamp, 2:47. No official flight team. No mission record. But the format matched special evac routes used by JSOC teams. Morales had seen one once, Shadow Exfil, where the bird flew lights out, picked up what was left, and disappeared before the wind caught the sound. Most weren't logged. This one hadn't been forgotten, just buried. He tucked the sheet back where he found it, closed the crate gently. The next morning, Hollis was already on the pad. Same gloves, same rhythm. She checked the TH-73 without a word. Didn't flinch when Morales passed her the fuel line. Didn't speak when he looked at her differently. He didn't say anything either. But when she moved to Bird 3, he walked beside her. Not to ask, just to learn how she listened. It was supposed to be a routine hover drill. A visiting SEAL unit was rotating through the base for short field insertion training. Quick lifts. Low dust. In and out. Mostly show and repetition. The kind of exercise where the only real challenge was the wind. High crossblow. Enough to throw a tail if you weren't paying attention. The pilot missed it. Midway through the turn, Bird 2 caught the gust wrong. Tail rotor shivered, pitch yawed just slightly. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to drop the rear edge and pitch the nose too sharp. Crew called abort. The bird skidded. Not hard. But when the dust cleared, the tail wheel was sitting twisted, one arm bent just enough to make the next flight unsafe. Morales was on the ground crew when it happened. He saw it unfold, saw the way everyone froze, especially the SEALs. That's when Hollis moved. She didn't run, didn't shout. She just walked to the side of the pad and looked at the bird like it was speaking a different language. She stared at the angle, scanned the marks in the sand, and said, "That's not a rotor failure. That's pilot hesitation." The SEAL commander turned. He was older, quiet, uniform clean but worn. A name patch that just said A. Keller. He stared at her like he'd heard that sentence before. "You fly?" he asked. She didn't answer. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You just called rotor hesitation by footprint shape. That's not guesswork." Still nothing. He tilted his head. "What bird?" She blinked once, then said, "Echo 9. He stepped back slightly. Repeat? Echo 9, she said again quietly. HH platform. Blackout flight. No comms. North Gulf Coast. 247 drop window. Keller didn't move. Didn't speak. Then softly. I was on the ground that night. She looked at him for the first time. You carried him on your shoulder, she said. You were the one in the cockpit, he replied. She nodded once. No pride. No reveal. Just memory. He straightened slowly. Turned to the flight crew. Get her cleared. For what? The crew chief asked. Keller didn't look away from her. For whatever bird she chooses to touch. The air on the pad changed after that. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. No one joked anymore. No more Jet Juice Jill. No more. Just a contractor. Now when she walked the line, people made room, quietly. Like they weren't sure if they were in the way, or if she'd already been where they were trying to get. Keller never filed a report. Didn't submit a commendation. No transcript. Just a quiet message to the hangar. She's cleared. No further vetting. That was all. But the crews knew what it meant. They saw how she moved. And more importantly, they saw how Keller, a man who barely spoke to flight ops, stood still while she spoke, and never interrupted her again. Morales watched it unfold without ceremony. She still didn't change her routine. Still walked the pad before sunup. Still checked valves by ear. Still carried her clipboard tucked flat against her ribs like it wasn't a prop, but a habit. But now, when she paused at bird 2, no one second-guessed her line call. When she stepped behind a throttle housing and gave a nod, the crew turned the ignition after she nodded, not before. One day, Morales caught her rechecking a tail arc after the bird had already been cleared. He said nothing. She glanced back. Too much wind. Pilot will correct late. Morales raised an eyebrow. You want to tell him? She just half shrugged. He'll feel it if he's honest. Sure enough, the flight came back early. Pilot reported tail drift. Slight yaw on return. No damage. Just confirmation. Later that week, Morales asked her why she never stepped forward when the command team arrived. Why she didn't wear a patch. She looked at him for a long time before answering. I already got what I came for. Morales tilted his head. What's that? She ran a thumb over the edge of her gloves. To walk the line again, without echoes behind her. He didn't understand what she meant until much later. But he remembered it. Especially the word again. By the time the next supply truck rolled through, she was already gone. No goodbye. No transfer papers. No final walk across the pad. Just an empty gear locker. Her gloves folded clean on the bench. Her name tag left on the hook, turned backward. Nothing else. Morales was the one who noticed first. He came in early, same as usual, expecting to see her walking the tarmac with the clipboard under one arm. But her shadow wasn't there. Her gait wasn't pacing the tail rotors. And when he checked the log, there was no entry. No initials. No fuel sheets. Just a gap, like she'd never existed on paper at all. He stood by bird 3 for a long while. Didn't say much when Keller arrived on base later that morning. The SEAL commander didn't look surprised. He just walked to the corner of the maintenance shed and stood under the slatted window, staring at the clouds like he was remembering the noise of a rotor that had already passed. She wasn't supposed to be here long, he said. Morales didn't reply. Keller nodded at the gloves still resting on the bench. You know what she flew before? No, Morales said. But I know how she flew. Even on the ground. Keller smiled, almost. Then Keller said, that's the right answer. Later that afternoon, someone found a fuel tag pinned under a gear pouch behind the TH-73. Not an official one. It was hand-cut, edge-worn, numbers written in pencil. But on the back, scrawled in even lines, don't chase the flight. Let it come to you. No signature. No initials. But taped next to it, inside the pouch, was a faded rotor arc diagram, old military flight training layout, barely legible. But in the corner was a small black ink stamp, Echo 9, the bird she flew without comms, the one that pulled out seals under blackout routing, the one that was never logged except in silence and weather. Morales folded the tag, slid it into his vest. That evening, during night runs, the crew stood a little longer before startup. No orders, no ritual. They just waited. Watched the sky. Listened to the air move over the ridgeline the way she used to, not for danger, but direction. And when they flew, they did so with the weight of someone who'd once left quietly, and had never really returned. Because her silence had stayed. No one replaced her. Officially, a new contractor filled the roster 2 weeks later, a younger guy from out east who handled his checklists fine. But he walked the pad like it was just a job. Not like it was memory. Not like her. Bird 3 flew cleaner now. Not because the machine changed, but because the hands around it did. The crew walked slower around the skids, checked lines twice, looked at the wind like it had something to say. Morales never spoke about the kneeboard he'd found, never showed anyone the tag from Echo 9. He kept it tucked behind the lining of his flight vest, the pencil fading slightly more each time he touched it. Sometimes, on dusk rotations, he'd catch himself watching the far edge of the pad, the empty space just beyond the TH-73s, half expecting to see her again, ball cap low, gloves in her hand, eyes on the tail assembly. She never came, but her rhythm stayed. One morning, after a strong crosswind night, Morales found something tucked under the edge of the refueling crate. A scrap of log paper, faded, creased. On it, 3 small dots, perfectly spaced, like rotor strikes on soft ground. And beneath them, the same quiet phrase. Some birds don't need call signs, they leave wake in silence. No name, no sender. But everyone who worked the pad that week moved quieter, lifted steadier, let the silence fill the space before startup. They didn't speak about her. But every time the HH-60W lifted off smooth, no stutter, no stall, someone, somewhere on the line, would glance out toward the hills. Just for a second, as if remembering a flight that never made the log, but always made it home.